Thought I would talk about some of the emerging issues for Chesapeake Bay, some things that we're going to be seeing in the future. One of the most uh, relevant issues to climate change has to do with the rate of mean sea level rise, and this is the relative sea level rise. So part of that sea level rise has to do with ocean warming and expansion, and the actual sea uh, surface changing height, but also land subsidence. And so we've seen about a foot of sea level rise in the Baltimore Tide Station in the past century, but that rate's accelerating, and so much of the Chesapeake lands are vulnerable to sea level rise. Shadyside on the western shore virtually be underwater. Um, Lots of Dorchester County in the southern part uh, of Maryland, Tillman Island be pretty much truly separated, and as well as these rural and agricultural lands on the eastern shore. On the western shore, there's some places like downtown Baltimore, Fells Point, downtown Annapolis, downtown Alexandria, these historic areas that are vulnerable to sea level rise. Another emerging issues is the impact of fishing pressure, and we'll be talking more about fisheries issues specifically, but the menhaden rendering that goes on, the sport fishing combined with the commercial harvest of finfish and shellfish are very relevant to Chesapeake Bay, and those changes in pressures and uh, and associated impacts will be continuing. So we've seen that the crab harvest stimulated by the crab recovery stimulated by the harvest reductions and some fortuitous weather, and so we're getting a lot of positive feedback there. The oyster recovery, this is the oyster graph over time that has been touted as a potential recovery with implementation of sanctuaries. As Big Harris Creek oyster just on inside Tillman Island, a big large-scale oyster recovery restoration experiment going on, and so we'll be seeing a lot more of news about different harvest levels and um, sanctuary development. One of the problems that we see in with climate is we've got the low oxygen levels that occur due to phytoplankton degradation and bacterial decompositional processes in the bottom waters. But we also are seeing increasing temperatures in the sea surface, and that creates a habitat squeeze. So that it's too hot or not enough oxygen reduces the available habitat for things like striped bass. So we're going to see more of that coming into the future. But now this is an important concept. This Murphy et al. Paper has been touted. It's become one of those mantras for political leaders and Chesapeake Bay restoration management folks. And what they've been focusing on is that the summer hypoxia is reduced, and the implication, the inference drawn by Murphy, Kemp, and Ball that's been due to reductions of nutrients, particularly nitrogen. So that part of the story is being extolled widely. What the other part of the story that's not being told is that the spring hypoxia is enhanced. So the overall hypoxic volume hasn't changed. It's been traded off. We've added more spring but less summer, and that spring hypoxia is due to climate change. So once again, climate makes it more complicated, makes the restoration trajectory even that more difficult to achieve. So another issue of late has been the increasing sediment and nutrient inputs that have come across the Conowingo Dam, the dam that's at the bottom of the Susquehanna River. And that dam filling has meant that smaller runoff events create plumes of sediments and associated nutrients entering the bay. And so much so that some of the Maryland counties have instituted a lawsuit against the the people operating the Conowingo as a way of sort of deflecting the things they need to do. You can see from the satellite photo, however, the Choptank River on the eastern shore pretty much immune from the flow of the Susquehanna. So clearly the Choptank runoff problems will have to be solved on their own. But it's a contentious and ongoing issue, and some recent reports having to do with the dam reservoir filling have fueled that debate. So we know from the graph that we've seen otherwise about the influence of cover crops, but in the coastal plain. But what about these BMPs applied elsewhere, like in the Piedmont? And what are the other? Where's the other science to really look at the effectiveness of various BMPs, riparian revegetation, stormwater controls, rain gardens, etc. Another issue that we have in developed areas, this is a paper by Elmore et al., where they looked at the buried stream network that occurs in the urban areas of Baltimore, and you can see the streams that are throughout the Penobscot watershed flow down towards Baltimore Harbor, but then they disappear, and so they become culverts or pipes. And so instead of the processing and ecological function that occurs in a daylighted stream, once they're buried, they lose that functionality and they become direct conduits, the transport of water and pollutants into the harbor. So that's an infrastructure difficult question. How do you restore these buried streams? And ultimately, we have to ask the question: is it safe to swim or eat the fish? And there are Vibrio, there are enterococci, the coliform, bacteria that contaminate the water. There's PCB in fish tissue. There's mercury in fish tissue, and so people in the Baltimore Harbor, there's a waterfront partnership, an active group of business leaders and city and county folks that have a goal of swimmable, fishable harbor by 2020. Is that really realistic? Because look at the maybe Middle Branch there in the lower left, but certainly not the inner harbor anytime soon. So we have to be thinking about fishable, swimmable into the future. And when you have a buried stream network, when you have infrastructure and leaky pipes and sewage overflows, it gets really problem. You have pet waste and trash and garbage that enters the harbor. So there are lots of innovative solutions that are beginning to be touted. Floating wetlands is one example, but again, the science and the implementation is still untested. So we'll have to see how that progresses over time. But those are going to be issues that you'll be seeing, into the future, and with climate, with swimmable, fishable, with implications of the TMDL and the regulatory approach being applied. People are going to look very closely at these issues, and we'll have to manage into the future based on a variable set of parameters that are going to be changing throughout the future.